Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome to be my guest. Today we have Julie Rumrill with us. I said that right?
Yes.
Welcome, Julie. And Julie is an author who came in from New Haven, Connecticut. I used to live down in Norwalk and New Canaan and Stanford. But that's way down the other end.
So quite a jaunt, yeah.
Yeah, it took you a couple hours to get here.
It did.
See, there's courage. There you go. So she is the author of Finding Mary, A Journey of Reclamation. When did you first start writing it?
I first started writing it in 2014.
Wow.
Yes.
And it's taken you till this year to publish
I
it?
published it last year.
You did.
So, but I was writing up until 2020 anyway.
Julie Rumrill was only 4 when her 16-year-old sister Louise was murdered. 3 years later, her 13-year-old sister Mary died as well. Her broken family did what was necessary to survive, and mostly that meant silence. Silence about death, grief, and about them. Tell us about what you went through, what the book is about.
The book is actually about reconnection. It's about finding something that you felt was lost forever. And for me, that was my 2 sisters whom I lost when I was very young. So the book takes you through that journey along with me as I searched for different pieces of memories from myself, from others, and that led me to a realization that no one in my family actually knew where my sister Mary was buried, or so it seemed.
Yeah.
So wanting to visit her grave as part of that reconnection, I started on this journey, on this search.
It sounds like the show Dateline.
Kind of, but a little less drama.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You were only 4,
Mm-hmm.
and your 16-year-old sister was a great deal older than you are.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, she was.
And then you had so you were the middle child, or?
So our family is one quite complicated family. So my dad was married once before he married my mom, and my mom was married twice before she married my dad. They had children from all those marriages.
Yeah.
So they were in the family when I joined the family.
So where were you in the?
So I was the youngest at this time, in the what I call the old family, which is my older half siblings. I was the youngest when these deaths occurred, and then I have 4 younger siblings from my parents' marriage who came after me.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids. It's
Did you grow up in New
lively.
Haven?
I did not. I grew up in Thompson, Connecticut.
In Hopkins.
Thompson.
Connecticut, which is
Yes.
right over the line. We were just talking. Yeah, it's right over the line. It's not far from Putnam.
Exactly.
In fact, it's closer than Putnam.
Mhm.
Did you come in on 395?
I came from New Haven, so I
that's
took
right. Okay, so you
84
came
to
up
Mass Pike.
So what you did is to cope with this. I don't know how you did it. You went to an ishram in the Appalachian area. What was that like?
So when I went to the Appalachians, that journey was a silent retreat. And it was really eye-opening because when you sit with yourself in silence and quiet, just surrounded by nature and nothing else, for a series of days, I was there for a week, a lot of things bubble up. You have the time to think without external noise. You have a time to let your own thoughts come through without the influence of others. And for me, that was a time of deep reconnection and thinking about how I wanted to move forward and deal with some of the stuff that was coming up during that time.
Now, I haven't read her book yet, Finding Mary, and I'm trying to imagine what it must have been like. You lose both. Were these your blood sisters?
Well, I mean, they were half-sisters.
Half-sisters,
so,
sure, yeah.
But so blood sisters. We didn't really make much of a distinction.
Right. How did your family, besides the silence, how did did they come around to your way of trying to find out?
So this is exactly what I talk about in the book. It's this journey of how do you get people to talk about something that's so painful and so traumatic, especially after 40 years, right?
Yeah.
It's a long time. So people were hesitant then to talk about it. And then as time passed, it's sort of like it's in the past. It gets further away. You get further removed from it, which was part of my impetus for writing the book, because I felt like if I didn't remember them, if I didn't bring their memories into the present and carry them along into the future, they'd be forgotten.
Yeah, I felt that way too. I'm a, what do you call it? Mom said I used to follow her around as a kid and say, why? Why? And I haven't lost that. What do they call it? Curious minds?
Absolutely.
Some of us, just if you have a bee in your bonnet, you've got to find out. And you know how to detect things too. So also it says you had a close friend suddenly murdered too. What happened?
Well, so this friend of mine was definitely an eccentric individual, had many friends from different walks of life, let's say, tended to get himself into some pretty sticky situations, and this one time he didn't come out on the, let's say, the better end of it. So there was a lot of controversy over what was going on, the way the matter was handled by law, and I'm not denigrating law enforcement at all. I think they're wonderful. But there was a lot of confusion in what happened.
Oh, definitely.
And so just when it came out, the really what surfaced was that he had been murdered in the end. That was the conclusion. And the way that struck me was a lot of anger surfaced, because it made me realize that there was a lot of things I hadn't dealt with my sister Louise's murder. And just pushing that stuff down and pushing it away doesn't work long term. It eventually, even if it's 40 years later,
Did it get you physically? Did it affect your stomach or anything in your body a lot, holding it in?
I think it was more, for me it was more mental. Like I was angry, and especially Greg's murder really triggered that. And I didn't even know what I was angry at until I started to dig into it.
Yeah.
Because at this time I was well into the book and finding Mary and that whole journey, trying to get, some people who were close to me to really open up a little bit more, being cautious about doing that. And then Greg's death really brought a deeper level of this contract of silence that I talk about in the book. Brought it a deeper level of that, what was hidden beneath the surface, brought it
So
upward.
you were 4 when Louise was murdered. Was there a funeral? Did your parents, did they have a funeral for everybody, or?
Yes, there was a funeral.
With no body, right?
No, she was there. They had recovered her body. The police found it after the investigation and all
How
that.
long did that take, Julie?
A few days.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so my heart goes out to folks that are in that situation and their loved one is never found, because as horrible as it was for us, I think the only way it could have been worse is if she wasn't found. And we didn't have, and people talk about closure, and closure is not a real thing. Anyone who's been through trauma knows there is no closure. But I think that the best you can hope for is be able to have some finality, some ending to it. And for us, it was sending him to jail, and
You got him. You got
they
the
did.
guy.
They did. The police, yes, they did a wonderful job, and the Connecticut State Police, I can't say enough about them. They're really, they worked tirelessly, and even afterward, they were there for our family, which really mattered to us.
That counts. Did they put this character away for a long time?
They didn't, and it wasn't because of them. There were a lot of circumstances that were going on at the time, and he went away for about 10 years, roughly, and then got out, ironically, when I turned 16.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's ironic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. What happened? Now, you're married. Finding Mary. What happened? She became ill. Did she become ill? And then
My sister Mary died of asthma. She had a chronic asthma condition all her life, and it just got worse and worse as she got older. Some people grow out of it,
Yeah.
and for some people that doesn't happen.
it got worse and worse.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of somebody, at least in our day and time, passing away from asthma.
I thought it was curious too, Jan, but when I started to look into it, when I was writing the book, and I
Yeah.
thought it was it's really, there are people that still die from asthma today.
Really?
Yeah, it's just not one of those sicknesses that we have on the top of our mind.
No, yeah, exactly. And she was, 13? How old were you now when she was 13?
7, nearly 7, yeah.
That's only 3 years after your sister is murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Her broken family did what was necessary to survive, and mostly that meant, here we go, silence.
Yeah.
So that had to be like, no, don't go there, right?
Well, it wasn't spoken, right? But like you talked about yourself as a curious child, I was that child.
Yeah.
I'm a scientist now. I have that boundless curiosity. I had it as a child. And I can only imagine what it must have been like to have this little peanut in the house going, why? Where is everyone? What's going on? Why? And so I think you just learned that asking questions made people sad, and you just didn't.
Well, if my mother would get sad, I think after a while she got a chuckle out of it, because I think she was a lot like me, but didn't come across like that. Back then it was like, well, you don't have to rock the boat. And I'd be there like, why? And I did rock the boat.
Yeah. Well, I think that my point with that was when you're asking questions about people that have died,
Yes.
especially children, that can be a real trigger. And it's when you don't have any good answers or things that you want to sit there and explain to a child, it's best to probably just try to move on.
We're talking with Julie Rumrill, and she is the author, true story, of Finding Mary, A Journey of Reclamation. How can they get a hold of your copies?
They can get a copy from in Webster, Mass. The Book Lovers Gourmet carries it. Also, you can go to my website, julierumrill.com, and I have a link to the little publisher that I use in New Jersey, who you can get the book from as well.
I love this. I've got to read this. Actually, I haven't read it yet, but chapter 1 begins at summer 1975 at Grandma's farm. What was that like? Peaceful?
Yes, idyllic. So it's a farm in Thompson, Connecticut. Thompson's a really rural area.
Yeah.
I would say like maybe Brookfield to...
Yeah, I grew up in Wilbraham. Near
Right,
Springfield. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So really rural, lots of farms and that. And it is idyllic. It's a great place when you're a kid to just be able to run around and just not worry about anything, right? It's totally safe. You're in nature, farm fields and cows and chickens.
Yeah.
Just beautiful.
Sounds like my mother used to love the North Conway area up in New Hampshire, and I went to college in Plymouth. Absolutely. She used to call it God's country.
It's one of my favorites, that area.
Up there,
Lake
right-
Winnipesaukee. Yep.
Oh, my, real?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, it's a small world. I love it up there.
Yep.
So, you're talking about Mary, and she was 7 years older than you at that time, right? Okay. And this happened while you were at Grandma's farm.
No, that
This was-
first chapter is set in my grandma's
That was
farm.
your... Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary and I used to spend time with my grandma, help her out after my grandpa died. And so we used to go walk way down the lane, which was, to kids, felt like forever, but probably was maybe a mile, and bring my great-grandma milk.
Oh,
Yeah.
From your own cows.
From my grandpa's cows,
Your
yeah.
grandpa's
Yeah.
cows.
From my Jaju's cows.
Did you have eggs there? Probably at the farm.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Eggs, cows, pigs?
My mom had a pig there after he passed. I don't know if he had pigs there or not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't
Does your
remember.
mom still have the farm?
The farm is still in the family. My brother currently takes care of it now.
Oh.
Mhm.
Once you became familiar and you went after the answers, how did your family take that? Your mom, your dad? What did they feel?
Yeah, that's
Tricky business.
certainly was a concern, right?
Yeah.
And they're both people who are fairly private, right? So
Yeah.
with things, they're not big talkers about their feelings and such. So it was hard. I had to respect that, and I had to be careful how I navigated around. That I made sure that the answers I was trying to get wasn't born out of my own curiosity,
Yeah.
but out of a deep, really desire to just have my sister's memories part of the family, not hidden, and I, just understanding what it was like or trying to put myself in their shoes as parents, as human beings that have lost children, trying to be sensitive to that as I'm asking.
Sensitive being the key word, right?
Mhm.
How did your siblings take it? Were they as curious as you?
My younger siblings were definitely curious. My older siblings were also curious about what I was writing, but to them, they lived it. So the book really impacted them in quite a different way. Where my younger siblings were more like, wow, they were introduced to these people they never knew. They never got a chance to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Whereas my older siblings were, wow, this is really helping us heal.
So you're at least I hate this word fortunate, but you're at least fortunate enough to have gravesites for each child.
Yes.
What about your friend Greg?
My friend Greg, I went to his service and paid my respects. I'm not sure where his wife buried him, so I have not been to his grave.
My gosh, Gosh, how did you get through? Did you go into counseling just to make it through at least for a while?
I went into counseling a little bit when I was up doing my graduate work at the University of Vermont, but more so just for the stress of going to school. A lot of this stuff, I wasn't even aware that it was there and that it was impacting my life until I really started writing, and that came about through a conversation one day, just a chance conversation with my dad, where he revealed to me a story about Mary, and he never talked about Mary, so that really impacted me. And he became quite emotional when he did, and I felt like all of a sudden it was real to me that I wasn't the only one who hadn't healed over her death.
Yeah.
And that now it was okay to look into this more because it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
It was about helping others. And that's what Mary would have wanted.
Did he give you any hint as to, we were on that farm and it was big and beautiful, kind of vulnerable, I would say, if somebody was in that area who had bad intentions? Did it happen near the farm?
No. So Mary died of asthma. So she.
Oh, the other.
Yes, Louise.
Yeah, Louise. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in Thompson, and typical teenagers hanging out and getting involved with the wrong crowd. And it can happen to anyone, right? At any time.
Yes, definitely. Chapter 2 is the embarkation. You embarked on the project.
Yes.
Quaddock Lake, Thompson, Connecticut, early summer. Now we're jumping to 2014.
Right, and that's the point where I had that conversation with my dad, which really started the story, the journey.
So he was able to talk about it at that point.
Well, he mentioned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he mentioned an incident which led me to want to pursue this further, this whole bringing them their memories back and honoring them.
Do you remember what the incident, what it was that he shared with you?
Sure. So it was the night that Mary died and him taking her to the hospital after her asthma attack.
He must have been absolutely traumatized himself. She was probably scared to death.
Everyone was. I mean, when you have someone in the family that has a chronic illness, especially one that's episodic, like asthma attacks, you're constantly on edge. When is the next one? How bad is it going to be?
Yeah. Sort of like epilepsy?
Yeah, or any other chronic condition.
It could be scary for the people around the patient, too.
Definitely.
I mean, the first time I saw my son's father have an epileptic seizure, grand mal, I was terrified. It looked like the wolf. He looked like a wolf man or something, but luckily his mother was there in the apartment, and I ran out of the room. Grown adult, I ran out of the room. She said, "All right, Jamp, watch the clock. I just want you to tell me." So she's smart. She was timing her son's, how long it lasted. He was fine. And for every seizure after that, he was fine. But I understand being the person with the patient. It's, you shouldn't show it to the patient. We know that all. The doctors practice not showing it if they can, but it's not easy. How did your mom feel? How did she take it when you were finding things?
Like I said, I was very cautious around her because I didn't want to bring up anything for her that would in any way make it worse, right? She's got these very difficult things that happen, that traumatic events that we only just would never wish on our worst enemy. And so I wanted to be really sensitive and careful as I talked with her about things. As I brought up memories, it was a little bit at a time. And I just tried to be really respectful.
Was she at first defensive? Didn't want any part of it?
No, actually. And that was interesting because I really didn't know how she would react, but I felt like apprehensive asking anything about it and I think just from being a child and just not wanting to make a bad situation worse.
Yeah.
So I approached it really carefully, and her reaction was not at all what I expected. She was, when I did ask her, and I asked her about very pointed things, it took sometimes a little finagling, but she was forthcoming with it.
What a family to be that strong. First you lose a little 4-year-old being murdered, and then you lose the older girl, 13, Louise.
Yeah, Louise was 16 when she was murdered. Mary was 13 when she died of asthma.
That's a lot, and it's only not that many years apart.
Right, exactly. Not a lot of recovery time, if you can recover. So you didn't
actually grieve until maybe Greg's death?
I think this whole book and the writing of the book was actually the grieving process for me.
This was it.
This was a lot of it, yeah.
She quotes Emily Dickinson. One need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not to be a house. The brain has corridors surpassing material place. Fantastic. I read that right through. I mean, I've been reading a lot about the different types of people. There are people who are called sensitives, and they're also empaths.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean they're psychic, but empathic, sensitive. And I understand what that is because I think since I was a child,
Mm-hmm.
and I could feel things, and it would internalize, go right to the stomach, like, ooh, you know. But as I grew older, I realized I have to be very careful because with a good friend, let's say, who's very sick or something like that, I mustn't internalize it so much that suddenly I'm coming up with feelings like they are. Mm-hmm. It's not, you know what I'm saying? You're detaching
yes,
with caring.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy. You sound like you are sensitive, and finally you were able to, with the book, this is it. Was it hard to write the book?
Absolutely. Parts of it were easier than
Mm-hmm.
others. Parts of it were harder than others. Anytime I think you're going back and looking at good memories,
Mm-hmm.
if that person has passed, of course, there's also that sadness that comes along with that,
Yeah.
right? That they're not here anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think at first, especially in writing it, a lot of that was coming up, a lot of that sadness, right? That wishing that they'd never gone, and thinking about what would my life be like if they were still here,
Yeah.
if I had those big sisters as
Yeah.
part of my
and
life.
what would have happened to them?
Right.
If
What would
had-
they have gone on and done, and what would they be now, and how would the world be a better place because
Right.
they had lived longer? And then, you know, through writing it, this transformation really occurred for me. And I know it was because I spent so much time and did so much work in this whole process. But I really started to look at it now, not through the lens of what I lost,
Mhm.
but through the lens of how fortunate was I to have them in my life for that time, for that short time. How fortunate was I? And that, for me, really changed everything.
That is a fantastic way to look at it. I know when I look at my parents' death, to me it was too early. I mean, and
Mhm.
Dad was 82, she was 84, but see, in Dad's family, they lived into their 90s. So that was very quick. But he died being her caretaker. He didn't take care of himself.
Right.
You ever go to the gravesites of your sisters
Sure.
and talk with them?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think it's, a lot of people say, well, why would you do that? I'm like, well, why not?
You know, being a scientist, I think at first, the way I approached that sort of thing was, well, you know, there's no evidence that people live beyond. And so I was very skeptical.
Yeah.
And through writing this book, different things just happened. And I talk about little coincidences in the book where I started to take a different view on that. And it's a view where I think, still from a science viewpoint, right, we have matter, and matter and energy can't be created or destroyed. There's a certain amount on Earth. So when someone dies, that energy that was them, that kept them going, in my opinion, has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And when I started writing the book, and I would get into these depths of despair, like, should I be doing this? Is this right? And you know, maybe I'm doing more harm than good to the people I'm asking to remember. All of that was going through. And when I started to get to those points, something would happen that would be just incredible to give me a sign that, okay.
Continue.
I would say, okay, Mary, I'm paying attention.
Yes.
I should keep going. Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement.
Yeah.
And it could be something about flowers just spontaneously coming up in a bizarre place. And I'll talk about that. And, you know, I talk about that in the book. So definitely a different viewpoint came about through writing this.
We're talking with Julie Rumrill, and she's the author of True Story, Finding Mary, A Journey of Reclamation. Again, Julie, how can they reach you and maybe to have you come speak and get your book?
Right, I'd be happy to come speak to book groups or libraries, local bookstores, and you can reach out to me through my website, julierumrill.com, and there's a contact form there. You can also reach out to me by email, rumrillj@gmail.com.
Julie shared with me that you're a teacher. You teach at a college,
Yes.
and you teach science.
Yes, I teach at Southern Connecticut State University. I've been teaching there since 2009.
Where did you after high school, did you know you were going to major in science somehow?
No, I didn't really know what I was going to do after high school. So I worked at Anglo Fabrics for a year in Webster, when it used to be in Webster.
Yeah.
And as a weaver. And I met this little Asian lady named Linda. And Linda said to me, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here. You should be doing nails."
You should be doing what?
Nails.
Nails?
Manicurist.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what her daughter did. So I said, "Really, Linda? Okay."
Yeah.
And I went to manicuring school, and I started my own salon. Went to hairdressing school after that.
Yeah.
Started my salon, and that's what I did for the first 10 years after I got out of high school.
Wow.
And then it wasn't until I was doing that I decided science was really what I was interested in.
Science was it. So you went to what college for that? Where'd you study science?
At Eastern Connecticut State.
Eastern
University.
Connecticut State. You went
In
through the whole
Willimantic.
4 years.
Yep.
And what kind of a degree did you get in science?
Environmental earth science.
Are you using it now?
Oh, sure. Well,
Yeah,
so
with the teaching.
then I went to graduate school after that at the University of Vermont, and now I'm teaching at Southern Connecticut State.
UVM. I know when I was
Yeah.
looking for a college to go to, you know how you sit with your parents, at least I did. We go over the ones that look pretty good.
Right.
And then you go to your guidance counselor, and maybe he suggests, well, maybe not that, but maybe this.
Mhm. It was a little bit different for me just because I was an adult going through this. By the time I got to graduate school,
Yeah.
I was in my late 20s,
Yeah.
actually early 30s. So
That's okay.
it was a different decision process where,
Yeah.
but I was the one sitting there with sticky notes and all these schools and trying to figure out,
Yeah.
where I wanted to head next.
Yeah, you came in a little later, and so you were going to school with the kids who were 10 years behind, or a little bit more. Or?
Yeah, I was going to school mainly with kids who are about 10 years younger than me.
That is cool, though. You know, right now I would go to school with kids my own godson's age in his 20s, right?
Right.
It doesn't bother me.
And there's such a mix now that
Oh yeah.
really people change their path in life all the time.
We have got just a few minutes left. We've been talking with Julie Rumrill, and she is the author of Finding Mary, A Journey of Reclamation, True Story. I can't wait to read a wonderful picture of you. Julie, where are you going to be appearing next?
So my next appearance is actually tomorrow night at the Thompson Library.
Ah!
Yeah.
Yep.
After that, I'll be in Branford at the Branford Library in Connecticut. But I do welcome any guest appearances. I'd be happy to go speak to your local library, any book clubs. I just like getting the book out there, getting the story out there, because the feedback I've gotten is that people really connect with the story. Unfortunately, most people in their lives have suffered loss, and many people have suffered multiple losses, and they have lots of grief that hasn't been yet explored. And for some people, this book has been really, really helpful in that process.
Do you have another book coming?
I have a couple of books I'm working on. So I have
What
a
are
bunch
they?
of vignettes from my parents, family stories about their growing up.
Memoirs.
Yes. So
Awesome. Yeah.
part of the wonderful thing about writing this book was I got to talk with my parents, both of them, in depth about their own childhood.
Yeah.
And I have the most precious stories about what it was like growing up in their families.
Yeah.
And so I'm stitching those together in a book. And then I'm working on a field study book from my experiences as an undergraduate, traveling around and getting involved in different science projects.
Fantastic. What talent. Well, Julie, you've got the new books coming up, right? Let me know. We'll get you back on, and you can go
Thank
down
you.
to the downstairs to the Upton Town Library. You can pick up a copy of Finding Mary. Thank you for being with us. We want to see you again, okay?
Thank you so much, Jan. I
Thank you.
appreciate
We'll
it.
see you next time and be my guest.
Riding on a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.